Now, we got frantic requests from, I think, Myra Bramwitz, Herb Friedman. Myra Bramwitz was in Berlin at the time, that they must, it was Herb, I think, who was collecting the cigarettes, that they must have cigarettes, that they were able to buy a Jew for a carton of cigarettes crossing the borders out of Stettin. I don't know the details exactly what went on up there, but this was after the Kielce riots, I believe. I'm not too sure. Maybe not, because later on when I was in Austria, I think well, maybe that was Kielce. There was anyway, there was a stream of people, and I'll have to check the history book. You can look in Bauer's book. A stream of people kept coming in, and apparently in Stettin, which means dealing with the Russians, the cigarettes were necessary. So we began collecting cigarettes, and I remember that every Friday night we filled up a footlocker full of cartons of cigarettes, which the fellas gave up and mooched and talked other people into donating and so on. They were rationed. Cigarettes were rationed. They couldn't just buy them freely. A carton a week. But that meant that if a guy came in with 5 cartons of cigarettes, that he had talked his buddies into doing this. So that meant that this was real work, real PR work, because first of all, he was talking maybe to some Jewish buddies and involved them, and I'm sure he was getting them from non-Jewish buddies as well. So that was one of the things that the council did also. Now, obviously, we're only at the beginning of answering question 3. And I want to get to some, and we have we've answered 4 fairly well, and a little bit of 5, how we provided food and other necessities. But I want to make clear that the amount of food, we used food for specific occasions, for outings, for children. What did you want to say?
I'll tell about my $50.
All right.
As the wife of an American officer, I was allowed to buy $50 worth of food a month in the commissary, which I did buy, and I used that food. We never ate at home. We were able to eat in the officers' club, or anyway, we were never home, just the 2 of us. So I gave that money, that food, to the either to the people who were in charge of Aliyah Bet, and they used that food for trips, or a lot of the food I gave to the JWB to use for the soldiers. A lot. I mean, whatever food there was available, I used to buy all the bread I could, and anything else that was available. Wasn't a very big choice.
All right. Nevertheless, I think it should be clear that our contribution of food was comparatively insignificant. It may have had some moral significance, but compared to what, large numbers, you're talking about thousands of people in a camp. I don't know how many thousand were in Salzheim, near Frankfurt. But compared to the need, that was a very small amount. We were able to supply food for somebody's special simcha, for children, for families who were scattered, from packages from families who were scattered throughout Frankfurt or weren't getting rations, and we used it for things of that kind. The basic food came from UNRWA and came from the joint, and I'll discuss that later when I get to the camps. Now, sticking to the GI Council still for a moment, there were, I want to mention Babenhausen, which was one of the bad places where the physical conditions were so bad that when the Jews got there, on the boxcars, they refused to get off, and there was a strike of a kind, and I and some other chaplains rushed down there. But the council came there soon, and the council did a lot to make the people feel a little more, feel better. At least they saw that they had some support. It was Sukkot time, I remember that. The reason I remember that it was Sukkot time, because I remember speaking there in Frankfurt to the GI Council on the subject, the little sukkah beside the big sukkah. It was ridiculous, I said, for the people in Babenhausen living in those Quonset huts, which were worse than sukkahs, to be building sukkahs. If the sukkah is a symbol of being outdoors and braving the elements, they were already there. But nevertheless, they built sukkahs beside the little ones. Now, there's one other area that you ask about, and it involves the council. I think you asked about it, perhaps not. Just a minute. It's number 16. Did you ever collect guns, munitions, and money, or money to be sent to Palestine, and so on? I don't recall that we ever had a collection of money, because everything was much more valuable than money. Money was generally worthless. Those were occupation marks. Although in some instances perhaps some was collected. But on the guns and ammunition, one day a lady came into my office. She was a nice gal, and I'm ashamed to say that I can't remember her name at the moment, because I met her later on a couple of times and so on. She was from America, an American, and she apparently was collecting guns. Not ammunition, but guns. And she wanted handguns, revolvers, and so on. That was her special mission. I don't recall who she said she was affiliated with, you know, what underground organization, or somehow or other. I had the impression, I was satisfied after some inquiry in the camps and so on. By now I'd been active in the Zionist groups and meetings, that she was kosher. And that this was going to get to the main body in Israel, which was Haganah and so on, and perhaps was needed for some of the work in Europe as well. So I said to her, look, I have no idea whether I can get a single gun. I don't have one. I'd be glad to give you mine, but chaplains don't carry guns. And I have no idea what will happen or how many I will get. And of course I can't stand up there, even in front of the congregation, but I will get word around to a few of the boys and tell them what is needed. Actually, as I recall, I went to a Jewish lieutenant or a doctor or someone like that, and the council also was involved, I suppose, through some of its members, but I just kind of kept it away from that whole official area. Oh yes, the newspaper in a moment. And I spoke to some people that I knew personally, and I told them, look, if you can get a few guns, see what you can do. I don't know how many guns were collected, because through my office, directly brought to me, there were about 6, 7, 8 hand pistols. But again, I put this gal in contact with this lieutenant, and I said, look, this business of guns in my drawer, which I had to lock up a few nights and so on, it's going to be bad, because there's no point in my getting kicked out of Europe at this point. I just got here. And I'll keep passing the word around. We'll see what we can do, but better not use them through here, because there's not even supposed to be a gun in this whole building. So the lieutenant then told me that he would continue it, and she told me he did, and that there were guns collected, and whether Frankfurt, and whether he collected 100 or 1,000 or 20, I don't know, but I know that the operation continued, and I wasn't involved in it. But there was one phase that she said was the most important. She said she had been trying to get hold of a small arms manual of the United States Army, and she just couldn't get it because everyone was afraid, I don't know, couldn't, or whatever reason it was. So I figured, well, what can happen? I said, it's a book, isn't it? It's a book. So I said, I'll try it. So together, next time when I sent to the sergeant of the depot my order for votive candles and wafers, which are the, you know what they are, I won't describe the details, and other things, and maybe some other things, I wrote down right in the middle, not even at the end, right in the middle, like number 6 out of the 20. This time I combined all of the orders, the Catholics, the Protestants, mine, into one sheet. I retyped the whole thing, and number 16 said, small arms manual, weapons, fire, MC 4319, whatever. I had the whole number and everything. First I found out, somebody went and found out the number in the description in exact detail, and on the bottom it says, this request does not exceed the needs of this section, just like it always did. And I mean, what could happen can happen. I can maybe deny that I even knew it was on there, whatever it is. So I signed my name to it. The next time the package came with the truck, like it always comes, everything is delivered to me, the candles, the wafers, the manual, and everything else. So she was just delighted. And, you know, according to her, I won the whole war in Israel by getting that manual. It could be that they really needed it, and that, you know, that it was of some use to them. But in any case, that bears mention. In Frankfurt, Germany, there was a young man named Dr. Israel Blumenfeld, whom I later got to know quite well because we met again in Los Angeles many years later. And he was the head of the Israel Histadrut campaign for the West Coast, having come here from Caracas or somewhere in South America. In any case, he was there as a displaced person, and he came in to my office, a very cultured gentleman. I imagine we spoke in Yiddish or in Hebrew, although my Hebrew was just developing then. I knew Hebrew classically, but not as a spoken language. But by the time I got to Austria, I'd been speaking so much with the shlichim that I began speaking. We probably spoke in Yiddish. And he had the most amazing request of me, that maybe the most amazing I ever had. He said, I would like to put on the Eternal Light series, published, broadcast every Sunday morning by the Jewish Theological Seminary in German, here in Frankfurt. And he told me about the series. I guess if it had been on before, I guess I'd heard it before. And he said he was translating the tapes, and he was getting a group of people, pardon? He was translating the scripts, I mean, and he was getting a group of people together there who would broadcast it.
In German?
In German. And you know, especially in those days, if you look at some of the titles, Morton Wishengrad and some of the other people's scripts were, you know, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, some of this Passover stories. An Ordinary Megillah, I remember, was a story of Nazis and so on. And it really told the story in many dramatic episodes of the Jews during the Hitler period, before and after, and so on. And I opened my eyes, you know, it was a very daring thing to broadcast that in Frankfurt, Germany in those times. Of course, we were the victors, so to speak, but I didn't know how the Germans would react. And I especially didn't know whether we could do it, whether the army would approve it, and whether the Rundschau, the broadcasting company, would do it, and so on. What would they say? Well, Blumenfeld said, listen, don't worry, I know those guys. They'll do it at this point in history. We don't need to go to the army, because if you start up with the army, you're not going to get approval so quickly, and whatever it'll be. We just need the local German people to do it. And I need you for only one thing. Just walk in with me, that's all. So they'll see an American officer. And I did just that. I came into a meeting. My German, I had college German, but I refused to speak it after I got to Germany. But I understood what was going on. It was a high executive, you know, radio broadcast meeting with a very lovely table and a beautiful boardroom. Frankfurt at this time was 50-60% pretty badly bombed out. I remember walking to services on Friday nights, back and forth, or Saturday, from the IG Farben compound where we lived to Elsa Bramstromstrasse and smelling corpses. Remember the odor that was throughout the city? And but this was somehow preserved. It was a beautiful room and a fancy meeting and a long meeting, and whenever they asked me a question, I said, oh yes, that's very important, so on, whatever I said. I spoke no German, I spoke English, and they understood English pretty well. And he did it. Israel Blumenfeld broadcast, I don't know how many weeks, week after week, of the Eternal Light. I mean, I can't get it in Los Angeles, I must tell you right now. I've called NBC a number of times. How come you don't have the eternal light here?
What does he care about you?
Well, San Francisco has. My wife just reminds me, Alex, that you don't care about that. But it's very hard to talk without talking. In any case, you may edit it out as you like. You have full authority. In any case, Dr. Blumenfeld also, I discovered, was publishing a newspaper, and he lived in Marburg, Germany, and he published a Jewish Review. So when I learned that, he showed me a copy of his newspaper. I said, well, perhaps we could publish something for the council and for the Jewish GIs. And apparently, we wrote this little thing down here, which was enough for officialdom. I don't know how much of it was exactly so, but The Liberated is published under the auspices of the Chaplain Section Headquarters Command, USFET, by the Frankfurt Jewish GI Council, an unofficial organization sponsored by Chaplain Joseph Miller. Headquarters Command, USFET, APO 757. Permission for publication has been granted by the Printing Control Officer of Headquarters Command. The Liberated is printed under the direction of Israel I. Blumenfeld, editor of the Jewish Review in Marburg, Germany, editor Mr. John Lowe, production manager Mr. David Marcus. The Frankfurt GI Council meets at the Jewish Welfare Board Hospitality Center in Frankfurt, Germany. So we published The Liberated. We're happy of this here that Yehuda Lev brought to us. This is an offset copy, and I suppose it'll do you, although I have an original as well, so we'll see. Anyway, so that was another project of the GI Council. I don't know how many issues were some people feel there was only one. I have a definite feeling that it was more than one, but it did a lot because it gave us kind of an official standing, you see. Now, just to review for myself and for you the major areas that I haven't covered. One is inside the camps, what we did inside the camps, both the council, myself, Kay, and another is Aliyah Bet. Incidentally, if I forget, I probably won't, I'll make a note of it. One of the questions you don't ask about in the work is the matter of education and schools and things of that kind that were going on in the camps, and I'll try to touch on that. This tape is about to run out, and perhaps I would like, toward the end of this tape, to put down one of the major adventures that we had in Aliyah Bet that took place at this time in Frankfurt, Germany. And 3 or 4 of these I'm going to have to tell you, and so I'll get them out of the way one at a time. I will join with me in reconstructing this. A delegation came to me from Frankfurt, Germany. By this time, from Salzheim. This was the largest camp in the area. By this time, they knew me quite well. I'd been there for many things, many occasions. Incidentally, I'd married a number of the DPs to each other.
I was waiting.
And so a delegation came. I couldn't remember who it was, but I do remember definitely that Zev Birger, who is now the SCAN, the associate, the vice minister of industries in Israel, was one of them, or at least he was on the convoy. And he can probably fill you in. I gave you his address in Jerusalem on who were the people who directed it. But I can remember their faces, and I remember the incident. They wanted me to accompany a convoy, an Aliyah Bet convoy. This was the first major undertaking of this kind, except for those limited ones that I mentioned in Belgium, that Kay and I were involved in. Involved the movement of approximately 500 Jews from Germany to Belgium, because the there was apparently no other path open at that time. And from Belgium, they were either going to go to the sea or perhaps go down to France. I don't know. But the point of our job was to get them to Belgium. And so that you can consider the feelings and the role and the position of the Jewish chaplain, just try to recollect what my reaction was. I certainly wanted to do it. There probably was some danger involved, but in those days I wasn't thinking of anything like that. I was thinking only, again, in the matter of ensuring and covering myself. I felt that in order to see this whole period through, I had to be clean with the Army. So what I did was, it was, I think, Sukkot coming up again soon, and yes, I know, it must have been, because it was, oh no, rain would occur there at any time, but it was around there, I'm pretty sure, because I remember that I talked to my chief and said that I have to go to Antwerp, because, no, that's something else. That happened in Brussels, in Namur, Belgium, just to backtrack for a moment. I made a trip to Antwerp to pick up some Sifrei Torah. I heard that there were some Torah in Antwerp, and we needed them for the Jewish community, my community, and later on Dave Marcus and I took another Torah to Germany with us. But in this case, it was to Brussels, since I was going to Belgium. I wanted to go to Brussels to get at etrogim and lulavim for the Sukkot festival, not in excess of the needs of my department. So I got travel orders for myself and Kay, and a jeep to go to Brussels. They offered me a driver as well, but obviously I couldn't take the driver. And this time I only had jeeps out of the carpool. Later on in Belgium, my position changed because as part of the 4th Constabulary Regiment, I had my own jeep. So that was clear, at least for a period of days. I was going somewhere, and indeed I intended to stop in Brussels. That was our plan. We would stop in Brussels and get the Esregim. We showed up at Frankfurt on an appointed day. I was still fairly unsophisticated about the ways of the Aliyah Bet. Later on in Austria, I learned a lot more. And I was a little surprised to see a convoy of American trucks lined up, gassed up, lined up, full of Jews. You know, where did they get American trucks? I will send you, maybe photostat, a copy of a newspaper of the displaced persons camps. That'll give you some very interesting information on what was going on there. They're published by the DPs themselves. In any case, the trucks were there, the convoy was there. There were 1 or 2 motorcyclists.
There was one motorcyclist.
One motorcyclist.
And he tells this story in Meyer Levin's In Search.
Oh, he does.
This story is there as told by that motorcyclist, whose job was to make sure that all the trucks stuck together so that he would ride from the first, back and forth, from the first truck to the last car, so constantly to make sure that everybody was sticking together.
All right.
The whole story is in Meyer Levin's In Search.
All right, so you can look it up there, and you'll get the details of the story. Now, the other vehicle, except for the trucks, was my Jeep.
And there was
and in the Jeep, we had one of the DPs.
No, it was a Jewish, what do you call that? Zionist Congress. He was with us in the Jeep. We went.
Well, Kay and I are having a little difference of opinion about whether Zev Berger was on this. I remember.
No.
Oh, I see.
He went with
Maybe it was
Zionist
Bubik. Somebody told me about.
Zev was with us when we went to the Zionist Congress.
Who was in our apartment in Jerusalem who told me about the lock on the gate?
That was Zev, and that was when we went to Switzerland. We also went without passport.
Anyway, you'll have to ask Zev Berger whether he was on this particular convoy that we're describing now. Any case, there was somebody riding in the Jeep with us
Yes,
some of the
it was a
time.
shliach.
A shliach from Israel.
Right.
One of the shlichim. You know that the shlichim wore uniforms with the emblem JAFP, Jewish Agency for Palestine. That was their general attachment. Those who came with the Palestine and a Magen David on it and so on. And the Jews were very pleased to see a representative from the state of Israel in uniform and so on. But actually, some
took a double take whenever they saw.
Yes, some of them did work in the schools and in the camps, but a number of them were actually in the bricha, working aliyah bet. Anyway, it was a fine morning. It was in the middle of the week. I can say that, somewhere Monday through Thursday, probably the beginning of the week, because Friday night I had to be back for services. So I would date it as, if you can look up when Sukkot was, probably October 1946. And some records or letters that will give me a more exact date. We started out with these trucks. A long line of trucks. I don't know whether there were 20 or what, but some number like that.
Yeah, 15.
I didn't, I can't remember. We went traveling. To show you how I didn't understand the nature of what was in store for me, Kay and I didn't even bring any food along.
One time, turn of eating was gone because we shared whatever few sandwiches I had.
Yes, well, I recall we ran out of food. We didn't bring much food. In any case, and on top of that, we shared it. Okay, in any case, we were going along, and we were driving along through mountains and roads and through forests, and we were making our way in the general direction of Aachen. And we came to a forest, I remember. The truck stopped, the people got out, they roasted potatoes, and we came to, and it was nighttime. And at night we got off into an inn of some kind, and everybody slept on the floors. We slept on the floors. The people knew what they were in for. They brought blankets and covers and coats, and we didn't have anything. I think I slept on a table. Anyway, we went on. And little by little, it became obvious that we were in trouble, that we weren't going to get through so easily. We came to a point that we were supposed to cross, and it was about 4 or 5 in the morning. And that was the border. When we got to that border, there was a gate across it, and a large lock on the gate. And we had, the leaders and myself, had a discussion on how to handle this. It turned out that that gate was not supposed to be locked, that somebody was supposed to have taken care of it, which means bribing guards or whatever it was, and we were supposed to go right through, but it was locked. So the question was whether to try to go off the road, and they figured out that it's quite possible. Maybe a truck would get stopped, maybe not. There was a small ditch, and we could possibly get off the road and make our way through a couple of trees and go on around it. But if we did that, it would seem almost incredible that the guards wouldn't wake up because they were still asleep. We had gone ahead with my Jeep. And if they woke up, they might start shooting at people. In any case, we would alert the whole army. So they finally came to the conclusion that we better go in and talk to the gendarmerie. Now I remember, my nightmares, Kay, for years afterwards, had to do with the fact that I thought that gate was unlocked. And the question was, should we just open the gate and roll right through and take a chance of being caught, or should we go around? But later they told me we had no choice, that we had to wake up the guards, that the decision we made although it turned out to be a wrong one, was the only one we could make.
I thought we were just caught. We were in the right on the border between the Belgium and...
No, that's a different time. That's the next night. This is the first night I'm talking about. Anyway, we went into that place. That's where our problem started. We went in, we woke up the local guards, and we tried to give them some double talk and show them some cartons of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey, but these guys were scared. And they said, we can't do anything because our commandant isn't here. That was the unfortunate part. If the captain or lieutenant, whoever was in charge, had been there, we probably would have gotten right through. But they were scared, and they wouldn't open the gate. So they were going to wait, and they told me, and then we ran ahead, you know, they let us through with the Jeep, and we ran ahead to a town looking for this doctor. Somebody was supposed to be the doctor and in charge, and we ran from place to place, and it was just absolutely terrible. And finally, I was running out of gas. So they told me where there is a Belgium officers club. So we came in. All of a sudden, it was just Kay and myself. We came into the Belgium officers club, and we didn't expect that this journey was going to be so long. And they were so pleased to see us. You know, they thought we were on with our orders that we had, and they didn't even ask for them. And they gave us a drink. I wanted to eat. I was starving, but they made me drink a drink, which I can't even drink after I've eaten. And we had a very fine time, and they loaded me up with gas and gave me a couple of extra jerry cans, and I just signed, you know, APO McNarney's headquarters, and they said, that's no trouble. They'll send the paper through, and they'll get it and so. Finally, after hours and hours, we came back to the convoy. We saw all the people sitting in the forest there, and we didn't know what to do. Finally, we turned around, and they said, okay, we'll go in another direction. There's another place at which we can get over the border. And it was night again. And it started to rain. I mean rain, pour. And we're driving along, and the people were... Open trucks, soaking wet. And even the Jeep, what's the Jeep, you know? It's almost half open anyway.
I don't remember all these.
You don't remember that it... And I'm driving this...
Oh, it was dark. We couldn't...
More than dark. It was pouring rain. And I'm driving, and we're leading. Our Jeep is leading. And we're going on, and all of a sudden I see a figure in my headlights waving his hands, you know, frantically. A German stop, and he stopped. He at the edge of not a cliff, but the edge of the mountain. I was going, the road, there was no more road. I was going right over the edge. And this... So I'm inching along. You know, you have the feeling like here in Southern California when you're going through the real thick fog, just inching along. And we went on and on and on, and finally we came to a large crossroads. At the crossroads, there was some Germans, and they said, yeah, this way, yeah, Belgium, go this way. And somebody else, we went into a cafe or something, and another German, in any case, a German said, okay, this way, straight ahead, where this man just told you to go is the British zone. We were 100 yards from the British zone, and there was no mark, there was no line, there was nothing. They were just waiting, because the whole country had been alerted that 500 Jews are in trucks, and the British and the Belgium apparently had some kind of collusion, at least on a local level, and they had decided they were going to turn us over to the British. Of course, the British had no jurisdiction as long as we were in the American zone of Germany, which we were. And so we got up to this point, and that's it. We would just roll across. We wouldn't even see anything, and once we were past there, they would stop us and arrest everybody. So, but this other German, whoever he was, somehow told us, don't go there. That's the Belgian zone. So we decided with the boys, as we called them, the Israelis and the DPs, that Kay and I would go ahead alone and case the joint and see what's going on.
We went to jail.
And we went ahead, and we went into the station. There it was a police station, and sure enough, it was manned by Germans, French. It was Belgium already. Belgium. It was Belgium who crossed over the border, and they were French-speaking Belgians. So I spoke a very smattering of French. But my German, although it wasn't polished and I hadn't used it, was quite good. But I decided I wasn't going to speak German. It's better for me that I can't communicate with them. Let them talk English. Because I had 500 people behind me. Well, we got in there, and they started quizzing us. What are we doing here, and so on. And while they're quizzing us, and I saw their attitude was extremely hostile, and they tried to get the people to come over, I realized that I have to be cagey, and I also realized that in my pocket, I've got the list of all the names of every person on there, because we had some fake documents which we cooked up, or they cooked up, that made this seem like an army. We had the cooperation of some army officers, obviously. Later we saw it clearly.
All fake names, same passwords
Anyway.
they use over and over and over again for every aliyah bet. They got the same 500 names that they use, the same passwords, and they keep using them over and over and over again.
Anyway, it wasn't a very valid document, and I had it in my pocket. So the fellow said, well, where are your orders, this and that? I showed him my orders to Brussels. And they knew. He said, well, who are the trucks? And I don't know what kind of a cockamamie story I gave him about the trucks.
All right, give me the telephone. I'm going to call the
That's
general.
something else.
Right this minute.
Yes, but I told him some story about how I was going through the mountains, and I saw these poor people, and since I'm an American Army officer, you know, I was wearing my raincoat. They couldn't see I was a chaplain. I just had lieutenant's bars on. Since I'm an American Army officer, I couldn't leave these poor people alone, so I was trying to help them because I'm driving to Brussels. And I showed them I had orders to Brussels. Well, they apparently didn't believe me. But they wouldn't let us, so I said, okay, goodbye. They made it very clear that we were really under arrest and we couldn't leave. So I said, oh, great. Give me the telephone. And I got on the telephone and I said, I want General McNarney. And that was taking a chance, because if she would have gotten General McNarney, I would have been in trouble. What the hell was I doing there? But I figured, when I'm in Frankfurt, 20 blocks away, I can't get General McNarney. That French operator who can't speak a word of English is going to get General McNarney for me? So I started raising hell, and the more I saw that she was not going to get through, the surer I became in my position. And I told them, boy, when they hear about this in Frankfurt, and so on, you're going to cause an international incident. How dare you hold an American? I threw the Bible at them. And they got scared, because meanwhile, they really saw that I was putting through a call, and the operator talked to them. Yes, you'll get them. The general he was at a party, remember? He was at a party. He wasn't in his headquarters, and they're going to trace him down, this and that. So they became a little frightened, and they didn't see any reason to hold me further. And finally, they let me go, and I went back. So this was already...
Back, the soldiers came out with machine guns and lined everybody up and pointed the machine guns at us and said, start going back to Germany.
All right, so the trucks turned around, and we went back. Now our mission had completely changed. Instead of trying to get to Belgium, we had a very tough mission to get back to camp, to get back to Frankfurt. So we started back to Frankfurt, and it was nebechumedik. It was sad, and we were in the low spirits, and especially Kay and I, and we were starving, hungry, and so on. And on the way, I would have to take a look at the map and see if any of these towns would be familiar, but in the next morning, in the bright sunlight, we stopped. Oh, there was another reason to check in this town. I don't know why, something. Anyway, we stopped, and a kid jumped off of the back of a truck. Kay reminds me he was 17 years old. Jumped off the back of a truck, one of the trucks, and he got out too fast before the truck had come to a stop. So the next truck was too close and killed him. Just smashed him and killed him. That's when Kay and I had another adventure. We had to run down to the town, to the German town, and get a doctor to certify death, and it was a whole business because the police were all around. It was what was going on there. I'm not laughing, I'm crying. Will you please take my laugh off of the tape? And anyway,
We put the body in the Jeep.
we put the body in the Jeep, in our Jeep,
Mm-hmm.
and we went back. It was a fine procession. We came back to Frankfurt, and with the exception of the loss of the boy, nobody seemed to be in such a terrible mood, and I couldn't understand why. But in about a week or 10 days later, they explained it to me. They said, we gained a lot of experience. Somebody goofed up on the border. Everything is cleared up. All the people that you were with are now in Italy. This was 10 days later. They were already all in Italy. They went a different route and they got through. They said, that's nothing. We do that 4 times a week. It doesn't bother us. So that was the Aliyah Bet and the organization of the Aliyah Bet. There were some serious problems in the camps themselves. One of the problems was food. There was supposed to be, to my recollection, a minimum guarantee of 1,800 calories per person. And the committee swore that they weren't getting that much food. Now, these people were better settled than DPs that we came in contact with later, because they were right near a big city. They had some contacts. Some of them could do some business. It was called Schwarzmarkt, black market. But what was it? They sold a little this or a little that in order to buy some bread or some food. So they could supplement their diets to some extent. But we got into the kitchens, both in Frankfurt and later on especially in Austria, and we were able to see to it that some rations, where the rations were insufficient, especially in Austria, where we weren't under UNRWA care, but the constabulary regiment was in more direct charge of the area, we were able to get food. That was one thing. Another problem in the camps was schools and organization and understanding between the Germans and the Jews, and between the army and the Jews. Incidentally, I don't want to forget, it just occurred to me that in Germany we actually had in Austria later on, we actually had a blood libel incident, which I'll describe in some detail. Frankfurt, the head of the joint, as I recall, was a gal by the name of Sadie Sender. And Sadie Sender. And we worked with her. She came to services, and we did some things in cooperation. Somehow or other, our work with the joint was, in Frankfurt at least, was not much. Later on, I guess I got a clearer sense of it. They seemed to have a different philosophy. They were social workers, especially the worker in Frankfurt. They were doing their job. I couldn't put my finger on it too clearly, but I wasn't enthralled with their attitude. They were not interested, or at least certainly weren't going to get involved in Aliyah Bet or any of the Zionist work. They were sent over to take care of people. Many of them were nice people, I'm not saying that, certainly. But somehow or other, maybe other chaplains had more contact with them. Generally, I stayed away from them. And my work was with the committee, with the camp committee usually. I have a little room on this tape until it stops, so I'll just continue on a few things. I've answered questions 1, 2, and question 3 is going to take all the tapes for the whole experience. Question 4 we answered about the packages and food, and 5 we've answered. 6, I think we've answered about the response of Jewish GIs. I don't recall if I turned to Gentile GIs for anything. Oh yes, later. As far as, let me just put down here that I've answered it as far as Frankfurt is concerned, but Austria is a different story completely. Then the American Army's reaction to your activities, I'll have to wait for that later. That's Austria too. Contact with the JDC, I can give you a little more detail, although I don't want to go into that again. It wasn't that important. I did not have ongoing or daily contact with the JDC. The director of the JDC in Linz, Austria, where I was the rest of the time, was my next door neighbor, and we were personally friendly and all right, but I didn't feel that they were getting to the heart of the matter or that they had a good, real understanding of Jews. They really didn't, because these were Polish Jews. They didn't speak Yiddish, and they really couldn't get what they were trying to do. Number 9, I answered, and I am answering about the work with the Jewish Agency, and I'll give you a little more detail on 10. UNRWA, we knew UNRWA, of course, was in charge in Germany, but by the time we got down to Austria, it was, I can't remember the name of the organization. You might. It was not UNRWA, IRA, or something like that. In any case, down there, the Army was responsible for my area. But I did come to a number of places where there was UNRWA personnel. They always greeted us, and we exchanged friendship and cups of tea in various places. I remember in Feldafing and other places where the UNRWA offices were. And I cannot give you too much detail. My general impression was that I was very glad that they were there and that they were working on this matter of helping our DPs the same as others.
I remember, what was the name of that camp that I was helping, taking the case history of the people who had just opened up?
Siegenheim.
That was Siegenheim?
That was Siegenheim.
That was UNRWA.
Yes, of course. Everything in Germany was
And then
UNRWA.
when we were on the boxcars bringing in 1,000 people from Siberia, 1,000 people a day, and then the boxcar would stop in the middle of the night, and that was UNRWA on trucks with coffee for the people.
Are you talking about the Heilbronn matter? Yeah, the Heilbronn run you're talking about, yes. As long as we were in Germany, everything was UNRWA. And, you know, we weren't aware of UNRWA and international politics and Red Cross and all of these things. We just saw that there were people there whose job it was to help and feed and so on. And